Hey YouTube, this is Guy. On the table today, you can see that we have another Seiko wristwatch. This is the SARW003. I believe this is a JDM, Japanese domestic market, Presage line watch. I say I believe because finding any information about this watch was a little bit difficult. And, I went on to Seiko's Japan website, and there's other SARW watches that are very similar to this one on there, but not this one specifically. I suspect that perhaps this watch has been discontinued, or maybe it is currently currently has a very low product availability, because I've also looked at all of the major retailers that you would normally find JDM watches, and I'm just not finding it available anywhere. So I can't even tell you what the current going price is on it. I mean, I did find one seller on Amazon who had one for $685 or something. I couldn't find any on eBay. And in talking to the friend of mine, the viewer that loaned me this watch, he paid significantly less than $680 for this watch when he picked it up. So I think that inflated price, the basically no availability that I could find online, and the fact that I can't find it on Seiko's website leads me to believe that it is perhaps discontinued, which is a shame because it is a really sharp looking watch. I don't know why they are discontinuing so many nice watches lately. It's a little puzzling to me. But regardless, if you're interested in this watch, another option for you might be the SSA series of watches. I reviewed the SSA 309J1 previously, and it was loaned to me by the same viewer that loaned me this watch. Now, that watch does have a number of similarities to this watch that's on the table today in aesthetics, but different movement. The power reserve, this watch does feature a power reserve, which we'll talk about, had a different layout, but overall the aesthetic of it was pretty similar. So if you wanted to find this particular watch, I guess what I'm telling you is, number one, there seems to be some other models that are out there that are available, variations of this watch, or the SSA series of watches would be another alternative for you. But to dive into this watch in particular, we'll talk about the specifications first, which I always do. This watch has a case diameter of 40, on my calipers 40.5, so somewhere between 40 and 40.5 millimeters in diameter. So good case size. Thickness comes in a little bit thick at 14 millimeters thick. The lug width is 20 millimeters, pretty standard there. And the overall lug-to-lug from the top to the bottom of the lugs are, of course, what I like to call the wingspan of a watch. I get 47 millimeters. Now, those dimensions kind of feel a little large for this watch. This watch presents to be a little bit oversized for a dress watch, which makes me think, and the more I look at it, the more I have come to this conclusion. This isn't necessarily just a dress watch. Yes, it is kind of dressy. It's very nicely finished. It's a very attractive watch, but that a little bit larger than average thickness, I mean, I think that 14 millimeters is a little bit thicker than the Seiko Divers, the SKX watches. If I'm not mistaken, those are 13 millimeters. So, given the sort of chunkiness, it's not bad though. It's not a bad chunky. It's not a fat bottom girl, right? But, and for some people that's not bad either. But it's not a problem, the size. I'm not knocking it for the size. What I'm saying is, because of the size, I wouldn't consider this strictly a dress watch, nor because of the aesthetic would I call it a tool watch either. It feels like some sort of hybrid. It's almost like a triple threat, or I guess maybe a double threat would be the proper terminology there. It's interesting. The way that it presents is nice. I like it. But it has aspects of it that are a little dressed up. Stuff about the geometry and sizing of the case makes me feel that it's a little bit tooly. It's interesting, and I like it. Now, moving along the specifications, this does have a sapphire crystal, which I believe, I guess I'm not positive, but I believe most of, if not all of the Presage line watches have sapphire, not hard Lex, which is Seiko's proprietary crystal. It looks really good. Very, very crystal clear. If it's anti-reflective or not, I couldn't say. I mean, you can see reflections in my studio light as I shine it over there, of course. But as long as you don't catch it in crazy direct lighting, very, very clean and clear. Looks great. This watch is 10 bar, 100 meter water resist. We do, of course, have a date subdial at the 6 o'clock position, as you can see there, pointing to the 17th. And over at the 9 o'clock position is the power reserve indicator, indicating right now that we have about 10 hours of power available. I'll demonstrate that as I hand wind the watch a little bit later. Of course, this 6R27 movement is a 29 joule movement based off of the 6R15. It is obviously hand winding and hacking. Interesting thing, difference between this and the 6R15. The 6R15 is a 21,600 beat or vibration per hour movement. This movement runs at 28,800. I didn't realize before doing this research for this review that the movement in this watch or any 6R series movement ran at 28.8. So, learn something new every day. Speaking of the movement, I'll give you a quick look at the case back, which is an exhibition case back. Other information about the movement, 45-hour power reserve, so not quite as long as the 6R15 that it is based off of. And again, it's hand winding and hacking. The rotor on this movement has got some jeweling. You can see the lines. I don't know if in watchmaking that's called jeweling. In the firearms industry, it's kind of not common, but something that people do to their rifle bolts is they'll do that sort of swirly machine pattern polishing. It's called jeweling there, so I don't know if that's the same terminology here, but regardless, it's a little bit dressed up. I mean, it's not super dressed up, but a little bit. As far as the case back engraving goes, you got the Seiko branding, resistant 10 bar stainless steel, made in Japan. This is again a JDM watch, so it is made in Japan. Moving along, this watch did come on a metal bracelet, but the viewer that sent it to me sent it on this leather strap. If you're curious, the leather strap is a Weiss leather strap. I mean, black leather straps, black leather strap. I don't know that this is particularly any better quality than any other leather strap, but it looks good. It's decent for sure. So keep that in mind that this watch should come on a metal bracelet. Unfortunately, we don't have it, so I can't review that aspect of the watch. We're only going to be strictly talking about the actual body, the case of the watch. Now, I think I previously mentioned it, but in case I didn't, the SARW series, there are several variations of this watch available. This watch has just the date at the 6 o'clock position. Some of the variations have a day subdial at the 3 o'clock position, which is going to have a different movement. I think it might be, this is the 6R27. I think the one with the day complication may be the 6R21. Don't quote me on that, but regardless, you're going to have some other variations out there for this particular model. Different dial colors, different complications. All of them have the power reserve indicator, if I'm not mistaken. So, keep that in mind. If you're out there looking for one of these watches, there's a number of options available for you. Now, I do want to talk about this case a little bit more, as I kind of indicated when I was talking about the dimensions of the case. It does not, because of the sizing, present completely like a dress watch to me, and also the geometry and the shape of it. The case kind of has this tool watch feel to me. It's really nicely done. The sides are polished. The polishing is not outstanding, but it's very good. If we're comparing it to like luxury wristwatches, it's not there, but it's good. The tops of the lugs of the case, not sure if I can get a good lighting on it. It's got some geometry here, different facets. You can see on this inner area here around the edges of the lugs, where it's kind of like a mixture of brushing leading into polishing. It looks really good. The smooth bezel going around is lightly polished as well, as you can see. Overall, I like this case, and although it is, again, 14 millimeters thick, which might be a little thick for a dress watch, I think that it looks cool. It looks good, it wears nicely, for me, in my opinion, on my roughly 7-inch wrist. The crown on this watch at the 3 o'clock position is signed with the Seiko S, of course. Very common for their slightly above budget-lined watches to have that Seiko signature on the crown. Looks good. The crown, if we pull out the crown, to the second position, of course, it hacks the movement, as we had discussed before. The second hand stops running. If we look at the back, you can see that the balance wheel stops spinning. If we push that back in, balance wheel starts back up. And the movement starts running again. This is, of course, a hand winding movement. And when you hand wind this movement, you'll see at the 9 o'clock position, the power reserve indicator. Watch as I wind it. You can see that it's going up, 10, it's almost a 20. So right there, we're already up to a little over 20. Just out of curiosity, let's see, how many winds does it take to get up to 30 hours? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Call it like 9, maybe 10, because I was a little over 20. So every 10 winds seems to raise it up by about 10 hours. That's pretty much what I would have expected. I've been told in the past that if you want to wind, get a full wind on your wristwatch, it's usually 40 spins of the crown. That would be what I'm finding here with this power reserve indicator, is if I were to rotate this crown 40 times, it would go up to the 40-hour indicator, as we can see it doing right now. Of course, this watch has a little over 40, and there we go, fully wound up. I enjoy a power reserve indicator. I am surprised that it's not a little bit more common of a feature on wristwatches, and maybe it's because it's difficult to put it into the dial layout and keep the aesthetic, the flow of what they're going for. I don't know, but maybe they could figure out a way to put a power reserve indicator on the back of the watch case. That would be cool. But I really just like knowing how much reserve do I have. And the reason is because I find that watches keep their best times when they're fully wound up. In my experience, in my estimation, because most watches, again, not having a power reserve indicator, I can't be certain how wound up they are. But, using educated guesses, it seems to me that a watch keeps its best time when it's fully wound up. So having the benefit of a power reserve indicator would, make it easier to ensure that you are, in fact, fully wound. Another thing would be if I pick the watch up and it's at 20 hours of reserve, and I don't wind it, but I throw it on my wrist. I want to know, am I active enough to keep that rotor spinning around, automatically self-winding? So I could throw it on my wrist when it was below max and wear it for hours and look down and see, have I lost power, have I gained power? Because I have no idea, when I'm wearing a typical automatic watch. Am I active enough to keep it wound up all day long? I've never had a watch die on my wrist while I was wearing it, so I assume I am, but I don't really know. And that's one reason why I think power reserve indicators are kind of cool. Now, we'll kind of drill in here and look at the dial, because this is one of the more interesting aspects about this watch. Although, like I said about the case, I like the way that the case is designed and laid out. Well, laid out is not the right word, but all of the lines and the geometry of the case, I think that it's very nice looking. But this dial is something else. There's tons of different textures and layers going on there. You can see that there's, I don't know if I can zoom in there and get a really good look at it. That texturing there around the outer ring, it's not a waffle pattern. I'm not sure what you'd call that. Zigzag, maybe? It's got a cool little patterning going on there. And then behind the power reserve indicator bar on the 9 o'clock side, that same patterning going around just between the inner dial and the chapter ring all around it. Then you have a couple of other layers going in even further. The indices on this watch are very nice looking. They're polished, but then they have this stroke of brushing going down the center of each indice. With the exception of the 12 o'clock indice, it has 2 strokes of that brushed finish going down the center. Very, very nicely done. There is no lume on this dial whatsoever, and I think that was a good choice. In contrast to, say, the extremely popular SARW003, which has little pips of lume on the inner side of all of the indices. This one, again, has no lume. I wish that the SARB didn't have any lume on it either. It's not necessary for a watch like this, I don't think. So they made a really good choice in not looming up this dial, in my opinion. The branding, nothing is applied as far as the Seiko logo or the automatic 29 jewels, just printed on the dial. Looks good though. Down at the very bottom, Japan, and the movement, which is almost not legible, but 6R27 is, I'm sure, what it says there. I can't even see that text. But yeah, overall, a very, very attractive dial. And the dial is kind of what gives this watch a hint of that dressy feel. But the sizing gives it sort of that flavor of, being a little bit more of a robust tool watch. So it's interesting, like I said, dual threat going on with this piece, I think. Now, I did mention earlier I previously reviewed that SSA 309, and it is similar in design. The indices look very similar. The handset on that watch is very similar to this handset. As you can see, I don't know, I really talked about the hands on this watch. They're really nice looking. You have like a leading edge and a rear edge, and they have different finishings on the hour and the minute hand. It catches light really well. It looks very nice. It's a very similar handset on that SSA series watch. Difference is, though, this watch is smaller at 40 millimeters with 20 millimeter lugs. If you do look at my previous review of the SSA 309, or if you're looking for that watch or one of its brothers, that watch was a little bit bigger. It was a 42 millimeter watch with 22 millimeter lugs, as I recall. So if you want something a little bit smaller, maybe you saw that SSA 309 review and you were like, I like it, but I want something a little smaller. Maybe this is the watch that you should be looking for. Again, going to be difficult to find, I think, but they're out there. I'm sure they're out there on the secondhand market. So, be vigilant. I'm certain you could find one if you really wanted to. Basically, that's probably all I got to say about this watch. I'm going to cut this review a little bit short. Like I said, I just couldn't find a whole lot of information about it, and I just wanted to show it to you guys. It is a beautiful watch. That dial especially is that catch it in the right light. It is gorgeous. That texturing, I mean, you can't beat it. It's not like anything I've ever seen before. And I'm sure there's watches out there like it. They're, maybe even better, but it was a treat to have this here, to check it out. Super nice looking watch. I think you definitely would love to have this as a part of your collection if you like the styling and the aesthetic. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. I appreciate it. As always, like this video, subscribe. Down in the notes or description below this video, I will have links to my social media and whatnot. And I'll be back later this week with another review video. Thanks again. Bye.